One of the key things behind strategy games is strategy. After all, it is in the name itself. However, in order to protect yourself in a strategy game, you often have to make sure you can't tell your opponent what you're doing. And if your opponent does figure out what you're doing, it often means you'll lose the game. So, what's one of the easiest and most surefire ways to win a strategy game? You don't have a strategy to begin with. After all, your enemy can't really figure out what your playbook is if you've actually burned the playbook and don't use it at all. Or in the case of me playing Teamfight Tactics, I don't actually know what this game is, and nor do I have any strategies. So hopefully, if I win, this will be complete luck. And if I lose, it'll also be complete luck. At the very least, there will be absolutely no strategy happening in this strategy game. So sit back, figure out if you can find out my strategy, because I sure don't know what it is, and enjoy the chaos. Now, the game of TFT first starts out when you load in and you appear on the opening board, where you can start a where you can pick a power-up to start the game off. Now, I scroll through the power-ups and don't have any idea what they do, which is great because everyone decides to vote for the exact same power-up. Already off to a great start. In a strategy game, we need strategy, no one seems to be using it. Now, my first player on the board apparently only has a melee range and the board automatically sends him to the back line. So we're already starting off this strategy game really having no strategy whatsoever. I don't even know what this move does with him swinging his sword spear around, but it seems to work out. And when I select the units in the bottom bar, they do upgrade him, so at least against these NPC minions, I'm doing great, which would be great if this was only a PvE game and I wasn't fighting other players. Then again, it wouldn't be a league game if there wasn't a little toxicity and fighting other players in it. Apparently I'm in the final round of fighting these NPCs, PvE enemies, before I inevitably have to fight players. And my guy does a little spin move, which 4 rounds in, I have no idea what it does, and it's at this point that we pick our very first rune enchantment thingy. I figure I'd pick one of these ultimate epic items, which only I knew how it actually worked, and I go ahead and equip some of these items on the left. And in case you didn't realize how little strategy I have, I didn't notice that orb was just hanging out there until the round almost began. Once I got a Tactician's Crown, which allowed me to get another champion on the board, I just kind of select one at random and encounter this guy whose name I can't even pronounce, or hope to pronounce. I mean, this would require strategy in itself of figuring out how to pronounce this guy's name to begin with. But somehow my no strategy run is working and I don't need to figure out how to pronounce his name since I don't care about losers. And I'm able to win my very first round, which I imagine is not a trend that will continue for much longer. You see, once the second PvP combat starts, I'm already outnumbered by 6 to 4, which in a strategy game doesn't always seem too good. And that spin move that I don't know what it does doesn't help me this round, as I'm pretty easily beat. So it seems so far my no strategy run has a 50-50 chance of success, which surprisingly is not that bad. Round 3 has this happen, which seriously I don't know what anything here really means, so as always I just kind of picked the middle one. My voice is cracked. I kind of just picked the middle one and hope for the best, which, isn't too much strategy, but hoping is all I really got at this point. In another player combat, I'm almost immediately outnumbered yet again, and my guy up there in the top left gets, pounced around like a little dude in the board. This round goes as terribly as round 2 did previously. So now my no strategy run is going 1 for 2, which wouldn't be bad if I wasn't in bottom place. But thankfully 2 other players end up dropping even lower in the board than I do, so I'm not totally last, just not totally at the top either. We get a little bit of a break as we pick a champion, and I go ahead and completely swap out my entire roster in the middle of a round, really hammering home the point that I don't know what I'm doing and there's no strategy going on here. These guys are heavenly units, which if only I knew what that meant. Don't know what it means, and the description doesn't really help me too much, but it seems their abilities are pretty cool and it's good enough for me. Now, when the next player combat round starts, there's not a whole lot I seem to be able to do. I get pretty far at first, and there's a slight chance I'd win, but no. My little tactician dude kind of gets slapped around, and while I'm able to upgrade these champions to an even greater stat than before, I don't know what these little glowing effects actually mean for me. Hope they mean good things. I mean, it's all I really have to go off of. These visual indicators are my entire strategy at this point. It's a real good thing this is not a ranked game. The next player combat is going pretty well, and once I'm able to knock out this guy who seems to be regenerating health inevitably over and over again, I finally win the round. And as you can see in the very top, I'm 2 for 3, which overall isn't too bad for a guy who doesn't know who any of these champions are, or what these effects do. The next player combat sees even more visual effects than I had anticipated before. And, just like before, it starts out well, but it doesn't end well. In fact, I'm up against a guy that I can't really pronounce his name, so maybe the strategy here is to figure out my own opponent. I mean, know thy enemy, right? I go ahead and re-roll some of these different runes, I think, that I can select, and I figure out I would just go ahead and pick up another item. And I go ahead and throw down a behemoth, whatever that means. Not a big league guy, but seems to be doing well if this player combat round is any indication. In fact, it's going so well that I only lose one champion during the entire fight. I'm pretty sure. Or maybe two. I'm not really keeping track anymore. As we continue going forward and forward during the combat rounds, I'm able to pick up even more champions and upgrade them more and more. Which, if only I knew what that meant. The champion I have in the back row is completely fully equipped with items that seem to be doing pretty well. Until that champion gets slashed almost ribbons by some guy who teleports. And then the round doesn't go too well. Well, I probably shouldn't have expected much going against the literal #1 player in the entire game right now. Another carousel round goes, and still don't know what I'm doing, but I pick up another health item that can help out the main tank, or the guy at least who I think I'm trying to make into my tank. I don't actually know if he makes a good frontliner, I'm just kind of hoping he does because he's big and bulky and melee, so my video game instinct tells me that's a good guy to have in the front. Another player combat goes by, which starts off well and then doesn't end well. And it's at this point that I'm starting to see a constant recurring pattern in all of these games. Which is unfortunate, because the whole point of this, like, no strategy run is to have no strategy. So it kind of sucks if my strategy is, you know, becoming losing every match over and over again. The next round, like always, goes like the past like 2 or 3, and I lose once again, chalking this up to, I think, loss number 4 in a row. And in fact, this is almost another loss considering these NPC wolves completely obliterate my backline, but with a little bit of maneuvering I'm able to win this combat round somewhat easily. Or at least easier than all the other terrible ones have been so far. Finally, I'm able to achieve like a 3 gold star unit, and in fact I get my little tank frontliner dude to 3 stars himself. And if this player combat is any indication, it actually isn't working out too bad. It seems that my 3 or 4 loss streak is breaking, and my no strategy run is at least somewhat working, considering I'm able to win my first combat round in like almost a full 5 or 6 rounds in a row at this point. I go ahead and throw down another champion who I don't know what it does, and I do a little lucky spinning around before I face this guy yet again. You know, I'm starting to wonder if it's a little rigged that I keep facing this dude like 3 or 4 times in a row at this point. It's also funny now I'm thinking that I also lost like 3 or 4 times in a row. I wonder if there's some kind of like bad luck charm of always facing this guy in combat. And this guy who I lost to before just kind of pops up as a random spectator to watch the match, even though there is no reason for him to actually watch it. For the first time, I actually checked out what my champion's abilities actually do, and I don't know why that guy from earlier is now in this match, watching me lose yet again. It's a little bit strange. I'm not sure why these two guys seem to be intent on watching my no strategy run and seeing how much it's failing over and over again. But I take what seems to be a dragon hit to the face and decide to just walk it off, figuring out that it's not really worth the no strategy run thinking about my strategy too hard, after all. I have no idea what's going on in this carousel round. There's a dancing teapot. Well, I don't even know what that means. Is there strategy behind that? The next player round starts, and it doesn't end well at all. In fact, this one ends so terribly that I'm actually surprised I don't get knocked out at this point. But I'm 5 health points away, so I figure that this is gonna probably be my last round of this match. So, on the bright side, I'm not the last one though, because there is someone who was knocked out already, which is great. Once I do this final player combat round, I get the outcome I expected, and my no strategy run, in its totality, chalks up to an 0-1. But I did finish 7th place. And speaking of finishing, if you want to go ahead and go through all these channels? Why do I say channels? If you want to go through all the videos I have on the channel, you can go ahead and finish and go through all the unwatched videos so far. I may or may not have skipped a week accidentally of recording and uploading a video, but on the bright side, that just gives you more of an opportunity to go back and watch some of the greatest hits that the channel has managed to go through so far. And if you're new to the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button, liking this own video, and putting in the comments what kind of content you'd like to see in the future. After all, I'm always interested in growing the channel and making videos based on the type of content you guys want to see. So, as always, if you're interested in supporting the channel, it's always much appreciated. The next match that I head into to test out my no strategy run is a brand new one, where, just like before, we have 3 new opening strats that we can possibly select from. And just like before, I have not the slightest idea what a single one of these does. But unlike last time, everyone actually chooses their own separate, little starts, and one is finally chosen. Once I finally head into the board for the first time, I am not really going into an actual strategy run here. I figure out that we're gonna fast forward a bit because there's not a whole lot of commentary, if we're being honest. I have no idea what I'm doing in this round, just like last time. As a matter of fact, I don't really know what these purple circles do on the ground. I just know that they do something for me, which isn't helping me out too much, because after my very first player combat round, it doesn't go over at least the way I wanted it to. Player combat round 2 starts off the exact same way as it did last time. I don't even know what that explosion does, if I'm being completely honest, but it seems to have done something good in my favor, because I actually win that round even though I have not the slightest clue of what's going on. I now have the ability to drop down 4 champions on the board, and so I go ahead and just drop it down one of the purple circles and hope it actually does something for me. Once the player combat starts, which is the last one before the carousel round, it starts off pretty good, and unlike the last round, it actually ends well, making sure I get my first victory in a row like that. We're shaping up to be 2 in a row, and we're in 3rd place during this match, which is pretty fucking good if you ask me. I have no idea if I can curse. You know what, we're keeping it in anyway. We'll keep it in. The next round after the carousel is alright, except I noticed that my opponent seems to have this kind of like training dummy fake champion in the middle of the board, which doesn't impact me too much, as I'm able to go ahead and dispatch it pretty easily. And I'm able to also dispatch the rest of his team just as well. In fact, this little round of like the 2-whatever round of matches is actually going pretty well for me. And if you go ahead and look all the way at the top bar in the center over there, you can see that after this time, I've won 4 out of 5 matches, which is a pretty good track record. Whoa. The next combat round isn't an actual combat round and is instead just me fighting NPCs. But the same can't be said as I'm fighting my next player combat round, which is okay, and in fact at first I thought I might lose, and in fact I do, but we're gonna go ahead and skip that. Finally, we select the second rune of the match that we can select, and I go ahead and just pick up a new item, including this new one which allows me to get some upgraded form of an item that I didn't have before. Don't really exactly know what it does, but it seems to increase my magical power, so we're just gonna kinda go with it. Now this player combat round starts off fairly interesting, and my front line holds up fairly well against theirs, but it seems that their back line is significantly better than my own, and I lose the second player combat in a row, which is kind of making a diminishing return from how the game started. Now, I don't really know what I'm doing relative to my team, really emphasizing the no strategy run, only that getting these Umbral champions seems to be putting more of these purple circles on the board, and they seem to be having more synergy together with one another. So I just kind of run with it and hope that this carries off my team to victory, which it does not, as I go ahead and lose the 3rd player combat in a row. This carousel round doesn't have a dancing teapot in it this time. It does have a dancing woman that I don't recognize and don't know what she does. But I do know that this loss streak I'm having so far apparently gives me more gold, which would be the first time in a while that I've been rewarded for failing. I managed to pick up my very first 3-star champion of the match, and after some, very rapid fast forwarding through a bunch of very boring rounds over and over and over again, we're finally reaching what can kind of be considered the thrilling conclusion of this match. You see, at this point, 3 people have already been knocked out of this game, and there's only 5 people left, if I can do math correctly, which I can. Now this player combat phase is actually very interesting, because both of our front lines seem to be really tanky and just beating each other up over and over again. But while we may be able to match each other on the front line, we're not able to on the back line. And so I'm taken down minus 15 health after only a single fight, which doesn't bode well for the future rounds, especially when you see this team. Strategy and no strategy aside, when my opponent has a bunch of big, tanky, glowing characters right in front of me, I do not have a whole lot of faith in all that. I'm just gonna go ahead and assume this one's gonna be chalked up to a loss, especially when I have like 10 dudes campaigning right down towards my only remaining ally. At this point, I have a single health point left, and I figure there's not a whole lot of hope left for this run. So I go ahead and run into my very final player combat round that'll take place during this game. Spoiler alert, though, you can probably figure that one out by the length of the video at this point. Just like before, my front line is surprisingly strong, and it does hold up to its own and the enemy for not too bad. But like before, their backline is much better than my own, and so my no strategy run for Teamfight Tactics comes down to an 0-2. I guess what this video taught me is that 1, I'm not the best at strategy games, and 2, I should probably just stick to Smite. League of Legends doesn't really seem to be my thing, or at the very least strategy does not seem to be my thing.